Hey guys, welcome to the Raider Ram podcast. Here I'll be providing you guys with insights, analysis, breakdowns, and reactions of your Las Vegas Raiders. In this show, we'll be covering the knowns and unknowns of the Las Vegas Raiders heading into the 2024 training camp and 2024 season. Our first unknown is head coach Antonio Pierce. I feel like all Raider fans were thrilled to hear about the Antonio Pierce hire this offseason. With the hand he was dealt last season, being handed the keys after a loss in Detroit against the Lions, putting us at an overall record of 3-5, and finishing the year at 8-9, I feel like he did more than an admirable job. He finished with the overall record of 5-4. Is 9 games enough of a sample size though? Let's take a look at his wins and losses. The wins came up against teams such as the Giants, the Jets, the Broncos, the Chargers, and highlighted by a very impressive Christmas Day win against the Chiefs. Our losses came up against the Dolphins, the Chiefs at home, the Colts, and the Vikings in a game in which we scored 0 offensive points. Our wins came up against 4 teams that were under 500, but Pierce ended up winning the job because of a very impressive win against the Chiefs. Against more formidable opponents consistently, the Raiders seem to struggle, especially offensively. I think it's up to Pierce to move this franchise into a new direction. He has a lot to work on. As a first-time head coach, knowing situation is everything in this game. Understanding clock management and personnel is crucial in order to maximize time of possession and minimize our penalties. This game is separated by very little margin, and the Las Vegas Raiders franchise knows the feeling of a back-breaking penalty or just a mishap. A good sign is that penalties dropped significantly under Pierce in his 9 games. It dropped to just a mere 3.44 penalties per game. What Pierce does bring is a mystique and aura that this franchise hasn't had in a very long time. A sort of no BS, straight to business, kick your ass mindset that guys can really buy into. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, which the players seem to really appreciate, especially guys like Max Crosby. Let's see if he can build on this promising interim campaign he had last year. Actually, I should say let's hope. The Raiders can't afford a situation that they can never seem to avoid in recent memory. That is, having this job as an unknown next offseason. Our next unknown is our quarterback situation. We're going to be looking at Gardner Minshew versus Aiden O'Connell. And heading into this training camp, it's pretty obvious that the Raiders were heavily interested in drafting a rookie quarterback. You heard of guys like Jaden Daniels, especially, who was quarterbacking the team at Arizona State when Antonio Pierce was coaching, and names like Michael Penix, who was playing in the national championship game last year. And unfortunately, the Raiders couldn't land any of them. We tried heavily to trade up for Jaden Daniels, and it didn't work. There were a lot of reports that we would have taken Michael Penix at 13. However, he was taken at 8 by the Atlanta Falcons in a head-scratching move, to say the least. But now, a huge magnifying glass will be on the training camp battle between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Minshew started 15 games last year and nearly led the Colts to the playoffs after an injury to promising rookie Anthony Richardson. I'd say he was a drop pass away from winning that division. Nyheim Hines dropped a pass to pick up a first down, and the Houston Texans ended up winning that game. He finished the year with 3,300 yards, 18 total touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. So looking at Aiden O'Connell's year, his rookie year, it looked a little different. Very different, actually. After being named the starter in week 10, he was basically thrown into the fire. Josh McDaniels was fired midway through the year, along with offensive coordinator Mick Lombardi. Imagine being a 4th-round rookie quarterback, and your head coach, who you've learned under for the past, say, 6-7 months, was fired. And you basically had a new coach, new situation, new environment, and you were named the starter. I felt like he played decently, finishing the year with 2,218 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So, comparing the two, it's a complete clash of styles. Minshew is the more fluid, more mobile style of play. He can make plays with his feet. He has a decent arm. I wouldn't say it's the best arm, but he has a decent arm. He can make throws. He can make timing throws. He can make throws in tight windows. And Aiden O'Connell's style is much more traditional pocket passer, relying on timing, relying on anticipation, and I'd hope relying a lot on pre-snap. Aiden O'Connell's rookie year ended up being filled with lots of ups and downs, I'd say. He struggled a lot, especially in the Vikings game. The offense outputted 0 points. I mean, it was very frustrating watching that game. You felt like if the defense was giving their all. The Vikings had a backup quarterback, Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins. For those who know Nick Mullins, yep, there it is. But anyway, he ended up being able to output at least a sort of formidable drive, and he put 3 points on the board, which ended up being enough. So I think Aiden has to take another step forward, especially within the pocket. He has to be more mobile, a little more fluid. He can't be a first, second read and bail guy. He has to be able to create a little bit more with his feet, I'd say. In the modern NFL, if you can't make plays with your feet, you're basically dead. Coach Antonio Pierce came out and said Aiden would get the first snap. So I think that means he'd be getting the first team reps. I'm sure both the quarterbacks will be trading first team reps throughout training camp, throughout the preseason games. I'm sure they'll be getting a lot of looks. From what we've heard in minicamp and OTAs, we've seen that Aiden O'Connell has come out of his shell a little bit. He's more vocal. He's more of a leader. Max came out recently on his podcast, The Rush Pod, that Aiden's talking a little bit of shit too. So it's interesting to hear that and know that he's kind of a voice on the team now. He's not under the pressure of being a rookie, not under being the pressure of just picking up an offense, being yelled at, scrutinized all the time, being the punching bag, basically, just putting your head down and being a rookie. Now can come out of his shell a little bit, be a little more active, vocal with his teammates, and sort of compete. I think it's interesting that even Brian Hoyer came out recently and said that guys really gravitate towards Aiden, and under the situation he was put under, he had a very impressive rookie campaign. It'll be interesting to see how this offseason kind of unfolds and see what our quarterback situation will end up being like in week one. Will Minshew come out on top, being the more experienced, being the more veteran, sort of savvy leader, or will the young Aiden O'Connell come out on top? We'll have to wait and see. The next unknown would be the running back room. Will Zamir White be taking the feature role in this backfield? We had a lot of key additions this offseason. We signed Alexander Madison. We re-signed Amir Abdullah, which should help in the passing game. And we also drafted a 6th-round running back, Dylan Lauby. He seems to be more of a gadget player, sort of catching passes out of the backfield, making plays. But who knows, maybe he can make some noise in the running game too. Zamir White finished the season sledding strong with 4 straight starts. When star running back Josh Jacobs was hurt, he totaled for 397 rushing yards on almost 5 yards a carry. And he's looking to take over the main role in the backfield following the departure of Josh Jacobs to the Green Bay Packers. So I think the main question is he a fit for the feature role, or will we be going for more of a committee approach in Luke Getz's offense? There's plenty of fantasy football implications to this question. If Zamir White ends up taking the main role, I expect him to put up over 1,000 yards, being the main guy, and also being sort of a red zone threat because of his speed and acceleration through the gaps. I think plenty of it falls on Luke Getz. I don't think there is a correct approach, a clear approach in terms of making a feature back or going sort of by committee. History shows us that Getz likes a committee approach. In his previous job, he had a running back committee. He had Khalil Herbert. He also the Bears drafted Roschon Johnson. He was also kind of in the mix. Luke Getz stated that Zamir White is a talented player. He quotes, "He's a different cat. That is a speed that not so many guys have. And again, to be paired with that size he has, I think Z's just going to take off for sure when we get to training camp." It's good to hear stuff like that, especially after you lose a guy like Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was a all-pro 2 years ago, and he was injury-riddled last season, but you can't deny that he's an all-pro level talent. He's a top 5 running back when healthy. And to lose a guy like that, to lose a voice in the locker room like that, we need someone to pick up the slack. And speaking of guys that are coming out of their shell, Zamir is really going to have to do that. He's going to have to get out of his shell, sort of take a more vocal approach, and sort of lead this room if he wants to be that feature guy that he's been looking for the past couple years. There are plenty of good words to hear about our running back room right now, plenty of good words to hear about Zeus, but a lot of the uncertainties will be answered once the pads are officially on and we can see what Luke Getz installs. Speaking of Luke Getz, we're going to move on to our third and final unknown I'll be covering for this episode, which is our offensive coordinator, Luke Getz. Lots of pressure will be put on the first-year offensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders. A good amount of the success the Raiders will have will be based off of whether Getz can implement a successful scheme. A big change from the previous regime, running more outside zone, contrary to the more power approach that McDaniels installed for the last couple years. In his previous job, Getz did not have a lot of success in Chicago. He was unable to maximize the abilities of Justin Fields. Under him, the Bears averaged a mere 20.18 points per game, which was tied for 19th in the league. He led the league in rushing attempts and rushing yards in 2022 and 2023, which is encouraging for our running back room and guys like Zamir White. It could be a sign that we could be seeing a lot of Zamir White in a feature role, but again, a lot of those questions will be answered when training camp officially starts. In terms of the Raiders offense, we also mightily struggled to put up points on the board last year. Before McDaniels was fired, and even sort of after McDaniels was fired, we had struggles, especially moving the ball down the field with a rookie quarterback. We reached 21 points just once in the 8 games that Josh McDaniels was coaching. We saw a slight improvement when McDaniels got fired, however, but the offense never seemed to find a groove, and we could never confidently rely on our offense. We were mainly a defensive team the second half of the year. Although Getz struggled, I don't really think it's fair to put the Bears' failures all on him. Justin Fields struggled to make reads within Getz's design, which also contributed to the lack of success. Luke does have a lot to prove this year. There's new personnel and there's new quarterbacks. You have to decide on who's going to be the guy, and you're going to be the main decision maker when it comes to being that. And you have the responsibility of maximizing whoever you name the starter week 1, whether that be Aiden, whether that be Gardner. The film shows the ability of Luke being able to design plays, being able to scheme guys open, and being clever with how to use motion, using his personnel to his advantage. However, a lot of the film also showed that there was a lot of miscommunication in Chicago's offense. You had a lot of guys running the same routes within the same areas. You had guys running into each other, and quarterbacks just weren't making the correct reads. Whether that be on the quarterback, I feel like a lot of that has to do with the coach too. You can't place the responsibility fully on the quarterback or fully on the coach. It's a mix of both. However, a lot of the personnel and guys running in the same direction, guys being in the same area, like 2 people being in the same area, like that's a lot to do with the coaching. Whether he coached that or not, he has the responsibility of fixing those kinds of things. And with Chicago last year, you just didn't see that. You saw the offense struggle. Like I said, it helps to have Devontae's approval of our offensive coordinator, especially with him being one of our key offensive guys. We need him to produce. And like I said, expect to see lots of outside zone, lots of spread. You can definitely see the LaFleur influence in Getz's schemes. You're going to see lots of spread, getting the ball out quickly, which should help both of our quarterbacks, Gardner or Aiden, whoever starts. Now that we've covered some unknowns, let's cover some knowns, some things that we know about the team heading into the 2024 season. The thing we do know is that our defense will be a top 10 unit this year, mainly because our defense broke out towards the end of the last season. And recently added D lineman Christian Wilkins will only provide lots of value, lots of pressure towards the opposing quarterback. You also have Tyree Wilson entering into his second year, and a 26-year-old Max Crosby who's entering his prime and he recently got extended by the Raiders. We also have Malcolm Kuntz, who broke out towards the end of the year last year in his third year, and he really looked like he was coming into his own, especially during those Chargers and Chiefs games where he absolutely tore up whoever was in front of him, whether that have been Rashawn Slater or any all-pro tackle that was in front of him. He was going to get by. The sky's the limit. Entering his contract year, it's smart for him to sort of bet on himself, wait to get paid rather than getting an extension now with the Raiders, because he's only leaving money on the table at that point. You saw multiple names from the D-line at the Vegas Sack Summit this year as well, and it's good that this unit is actually building some sort of camaraderie with each other, because with a lot of chemistry, they can run defensive line games and really mess with opposing quarterbacks and offensive linemen. A lot of familiar faces in our linebacking core as well. Divine Diablo, Robert Spillane, and Luke Masterson all had very solid seasons. Robert Spillane being our middle linebacker, he handled a lot of the play calls, defensive play calls from Patrick Graham, and he did a really good job in his role. He broke his hand midway through the year, actually, and he actually played hurt for the majority of the year. I remember a play against the Jets, actually, where he intercepted a pass from Zach Wilson with the cast on his arm. Basically intercepted the ball with one hand and actually returned it for a good yardage. Luke Masterson graded well last year. He was great in coverage, and he showed some promise in some run fits. Our secondary is looking to build off a promising year as well. Jack Jones, who was acquired midway through the year by Antonio Pierce, was phenomenal for us. He had two of the most memorable pick sixes I've probably ever seen in my life. One against the Chargers, which was an insane one-handed interception of a screen pass, and he took it to the house. The next one was probably my favorite because it was against Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes always gets the best of us, and it was finally nice to see someone get the best of him and stare him down into the end zone. Trayvon Merrick had a very solid 2023 campaign and is looking to build off of it. Marcus Epps was a very savvy veteran leader, and he played well. The key is Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs, when healthy, in my opinion, is one of the best slot corners in the league. He's a great tackler. He can be sticky in coverage. He has it all, and I think he has the most potential. If we can get that true all-pro guy in our secondary, this defense can do a lot of damage this year. Paired with that elite defensive line and our corners being sticky in coverage, we will be a force to be reckoned with. And I'd say we have top 5 unit potential. A hole we do need to address is probably our second outside corner. We don't really have one after Amik Robertson departed, so we'll be looking into Jacorian Bennett really taking that next step, or Brandon Faison. Faison is a familiar face. He played for the Raiders during the 21 season where we made the playoffs and we played the Bengals. I remember him really struggling against Chase, but he was one of our best corners that year as well. So we'll be looking into those two for now. We might be tapping into some of the free agency market with our cap space, looking into guys like Stephon Gilmore, maybe even Xavier Howard, but his rapport is not looking good right now. So you really have to depend on the development of guys like Jacorian Bennett, who struggled in his rookie year, but guys like Tyree Wilson also struggled. It's important that our young players develop and they learn. Plenty of other names as well, like guys like Darian Butler, guys like Amari Burney, guys like Byron Young, who all struggled in their rookie years, but can really turn it on if they can develop, they can take the right steps in the offseason and really buy into what defensive coordinator Patrick Graham is teaching. And speaking of defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, we have him going into his third year, and that's going to be my next known. He is going to be in a head coaching position sometime next offseason. The way he's transformed this defense, I don't think there's many other guys that deserve his position next year like Patrick Graham. He's a very witty guy. He loves to teach the game of football and caters towards the strength of his players, which is really important. He's very adaptable, and that's very crucial in today's game because offenses are basically scheming endlessly based on their speed, their vertical advantage, and motion. It's important that the defense does the same. In order to change looks and keep offenses honest, being stubborn cannot be the way. It doesn't work in today's NFL. You cannot just sit back in a base defense and expect the offense to just not figure it out. They're going to eventually figure it out. It's interesting because Graham was initially a 3-4 guy, but he moved to more 4-down fronts when he came to the Raiders because he wanted to cater toward Max Crosby's strengths because he's one of our best players. And he's done a nice job in disguising coverages behind 4-3 fronts. It allowed for more time for the rush to get there. Graham puts his players in advantages, and with the addition of Christian Wilkins, this defense will take a massive step forward. Defensive line will do multiple sets of games. Our linebacking core will be sticky in coverage, aggressive in run fits, and our secondary will be constantly adapting and changing to personnel. Thank you for tuning into the Raider Rant podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to leave a subscription below. Follow me on Instagram at Raider_Ramp and on YouTube and Twitter at Raider Ramp. If you have any questions or have a topic you want me to address, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you, and go Raiders.